In a previous video, I talked about early Panzer Divisions and their organizational changes between 1935 and 1941. In this episode, I will follow up on that, extending the period covered all the way to 1943, the Kursk Offensive. Let's see what other changes these units went through and the results. After the fall of France, Hitler ordered the doubling of panzer and motorized divisions. This was achieved by removing the 2nd Panzer Regiment from each division that had it, leaving only a single regiment, which was accompanied by the 2 regiments of the motorized infantry or Schützen Brigade. This move also made the Panzer divisions lighter and more mobile, which was needed as their primary mission was still to seek decision on the battlefield by forming a Schwerpunkt and breaking through, then encircle enemy units and leaving them to the infantry to be mopped up. Attack was the only combat method. Even in defense, counterattacks had to be made, relying on speed and mobility. Tanks could not be used alone. Combined arms warfare was the key. Engineers opened a path by removing obstacles. The panzers then attacked, supported by motorized artillery that had to follow them during the move, while the infantry secured the area. Mixed combat groups, Kampfgruppen, were used. They replaced the original Panzer Brigade and the Schützen Brigade, but each element had its own task. However, in the Soviet Union, due to the lack of roads and accurate maps, fuel consumption soon tripled, making the units less agile, not to mention forward anti-tank units that also slowed them down. By the end of 1941, uniformity was not achieved. Even though each Panzer division now had a single Panzer regiment, some of them included not 2 but 3 battalions, while others kept some old support units. Each division was to have 2 Schützen regiments in the brigade, 1 artillery and a reconnaissance, a pioneer, a tank hunter, a communications, and a replacement battalion. In 1942, the reconnaissance and motorcycle battalions were merged, while a flag battalion was added to the artillery regiment. 27 Panzer divisions were formed in total. The 2 Schützen regiments were renamed Panzer Grenadier regiments, but after Stalingrad, many divisions were left with a single Panzer battalion in the Panzer regiment. The plan was to equip the 2nd battalion with Panthers, but this suffered significant delays. Still, firepower increased. Panzer divisions soon reached 15,000 men each, while foreign volunteers were increasingly used to replace losses in manpower. More reorganization took place at lower levels, of which I will not talk here. As I mentioned, some Panzer regiments still had 3 battalions. They were mainly equipped with Czech-made Panzer 35T and Panzer 38T tanks. The other divisions normally had 2 battalions, each with 2 light companies and their Panzer II and Panzer III tanks, and 1 medium company with Panzer IV and a few Panzer II tanks. They all had a workshop company and the other supply units. There were now fewer light tanks, only 28 in each battalion, and more medium tanks, 36 Panzer III and 14 Panzer IV tanks, but as new regiments were formed with 3 battalions instead of 2, the picture remained mixed. By 1942, there was a shortage of Panzer II and Panzer IV tanks, so organizational levels also varied based on availability. By early 1943, the light companies were dissolved. Each battalion was to have 4 medium companies instead, but there were never enough medium tanks to achieve this kind of uniformity. In the Schützen, now Panzer Grenadier brigades, there was supposed to be 1 armored and 1 motorized regiment, but lack of equipment, notably various versions of the SDKFZ 250, prevented this. Interestingly, 1 division had a fully armored brigade, while others could only equip a single battalion or just a single company with such armored personnel carriers. More flak guns were added, along with heavier anti-tank guns, flamethrowers, and mortars for increased firepower. I have already mentioned that the two reconnaissance units were merged in 1942. Originally, there were two such units in each division, one in the Panzer Regiment, the Panzeraufklärungs Battalion, and one in the Schützen Brigade, the Kraftschützen Battalion. These were merged to combine mobility with greater firepower. Then, in 1943, they were again renamed Panzeraufklärungs Battalion and started receiving 50mm and 75mm anti-tank guns, along with new armored cars and SDKFZ 250s that were equipped with mortars and 20mm guns. The artillery regiment had 105 and 150mm howitzers and 105mm heavy field guns. The flag battalion had 20mm and 88mm anti-aircraft guns, but there were also smaller units, communications, forward warning, etc. In 1943, the first 105mm Vespa self-propelled guns arrived, partially replacing already lost big guns in the artillery units. The anti-tank, Tank Hunter Battalion, started replacing the old 37mm guns with the newer 50mm model. Self-propelled Marder 1 and Marder 2 guns arrived as well in 1942. They were to form a single company within the battalion, while the other two companies remained motorized, but here too there was never enough equipment. Some divisions used either 75mm or captured 76.2mm heavy anti-tank guns. At the same time, the Pioneer Engineer Battalion had 900 men and 200 vehicles, but their Panzer I tanks were lost by the end of 1941, so SDKFZ 250 and 251 carriers were used instead, in smaller numbers, with rocket launchers, flamethrowers, and grenade launchers. The Communications Battalion also suffered from a lack of vehicles. Some of their units were armored on paper only. They did go under organizational changes in 1942, but they received more SDKFZ 251 telephone exchange and cable-laying health tracks. The Field Replacement Battalion was responsible for receiving newly trained personnel, while each division was to have 9 light and 3 heavy truck columns with a combined capacity of 450 tons, along with 3 heavy fuel truck columns with a capacity of 50 cubic meters. Losses at the front soon reduced these numbers, so in 1942 the columns were reorganized to keep the southern divisions at full strength. In 1943, the columns were merged, but their numbers soon shrank to 8, then to 5. The medical unit had 2 motorized companies and 3 ambulance platoons. These did not change much. The terrain and the climate influenced performance. Attrition was so severe that the Panzer divisions never recovered their full strength. During the Battle of Moscow, they had to fight on the defensive, increasingly relying on non-armored units as they ran out of combat-ready tanks. Movement was gradually sacrificed for increased firepower. The Panzer divisions now acted as fire brigades. Already, during the drive on Stalingrad, the lack of modern tanks reduced fighting capabilities. Between the 18th and 20th of December alone, 55 tanks were lost. This rate was too high. They were no longer able to inflict high losses on the enemy to make up for their own reduced strength. By the time of Kursk, the emphasis was on firepower, but while the Panzer divisions had more Tigers and new Panthers, they still had dozens of Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks. They could not break through these strong defenses, and after that, the Panzerwaffe would never reach its former glory. Overall, in 1941 alone, the Red Army lost 20,000 tanks, but most of these were outdated. They only had 1,800 modern tanks at the time. In contrast, the Wehrmacht lost 2,000 tanks, but that was roughly equal to their original strength. These losses could barely be replaced by December, so quick expansion was out of the question. In July 1943, they had 3,500 tanks, more than ever before, but only half of these were in Panzer Divisions, showing that they were no longer the main instrument of warfare. I hope you found this quick summary interesting. I'll be back with more episodes. See you later!